Okay, I'd like to call to order the work session for the City Council for the City of Wildwood for Monday, November 25th, 2019. Ms. Strumlinger, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bolin.
Here.
Councilmember Stevens.
Here.
Councilmember McCune.
Here.
Councilmember Boat.
Present.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Here.
Councilmember Dodwell.
Here.
Councilmember Remy. Councilmember Edens.
Here.
Councilmember Brost.
Here.
Councilmember Garitano.
Present.
Councilmember Werther.
Present.
Councilmember Jordan.
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon.
Here.
Councilmember Farmer. Councilmember Dillard.
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni.
Here.
Councilmember Gragnani.
Here. Okay, thank you. And our city attorney is stuck in traffic. He'll be here shortly. For those of you in the audience with us this evening, thank you for being here. If you have a cell phone or other electronic device that is on, if you would please turn it to silent during our meeting, we would appreciate it. Moving into information, according to my count, we have 8 items. Before we move to action items, is there anything in information that any member of the council would like to discuss or about which you have a question? Councilor McCutcheon.
Yeah, I'd like to discuss the domestic violence issue that was brought up last council meeting and wanted a discussion during work session.
Go ahead.
I submitted some information to everybody in an email this afternoon, and also had a chance to talk to a prosecuting attorney. So the reasons for establishing a municipal ordinance is the city ordinance assists in establishing and tracking a pattern of domestic violence. The city ordinance is a fallback when the county fails to prosecute, and the first offense is usually at the discretion of the county prosecutor. Intensity and frequency of abuse can be documented by local police, and if it's deemed at the state level that occurrences do not warrant prosecution, the offense can then be prosecuted according to the community ordinance. Evidence of a third occurrence becomes a felony versus a misdemeanor, and all counties adhere to the state statute, but I think it behooves us to have a community statute or community ordinance as well. And I know Officer Mondale, do you? Yeah. It was basically the same thing that you have in your email, except that I think there wasn't, the information I gathered was a stronger support for a municipal ordinance so that it's a fallback in case the prosecutor does not want to prosecute it. Is that correct?
Right. I spoke with Ms. Preuss today, the prosecutor also, and she conveyed that to me too, that would there or should there be a conviction at the municipal level and things progressed or continued, that could be used as evidence for a more serious charge by the state at some point in the future.
So it's basically the same thing, same information, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Captain Mundell. Councilor Stevens.
Joe, on the rural internet access update, it said that there was a November 20th webinar, and you were going to determine whether or not the city would qualify for the Missouri Economic Development grant funding. Is that correct? What was the results of that?
Councilmember Stevens, yes, the webinar was conducted by the Missouri Department of Economic Development. The city's consultant also participated in the webinar. For the most part, it appeared to the consultant as well as the Department of Planning that the grant program will favor providers, not necessarily local governments. The consultant is reviewing the information that was posted online after the webinar, all of the information that was discussed, the slides, etc. And we intend on talking at the beginning of next week to proceed forward. As you know, in the Rural Internet Access Update, we did receive the request for proposals in draft form, and that was provided to all of you. That is a step that we're proceeding forward with regardless of the grant opportunity. So we are on both tracks, so to speak, doing the best we can to explore and complete both.
Councilor McCune.
Yeah, so I want to go back to the domestic violence discussion, and I appreciate the memo and I appreciate the information you sent today. So I guess my question was kind of missed on the last discussion. What I wanted to find out was, what is the benefits of having a domestic ordinance with Wildwood versus what we currently have, which is the assault? And the memo said it's pretty much the same. It's just how it's worded. So they can default back to an assault at the muni level, which would be Wildwood. The penalty is the same, the 1 year and up to $1,000 fine. So we already have that vehicle that they can come back on. But I did a little bit more homework, and I was a little disappointed not seeing that in the interoffice memorandum, is that if we do, and I think that knowing this now, if we do have a domestic ordinance, once we have that tracked and on an individual, is it, a person can't carry a firearm after they have so many domestic assaults versus basic assaults. So that's kind of the information I was looking for from the county, is why would it benefit us if we already have something in place? So doing my research and knowing that if the classification of the charge, and we look back and they're convicted, that can prohibit them from a firearm versus a normal assault, I think it is prudent that the city does move forward for that reason alone. But that was kind of where I was at, because it didn't make sense just to put another vehicle that was just worded different into the ordinance. So for that, I think that it is important that we support that if that is truly the case here. And if it's not, I would love to see the captain at the podium. But for that reason, I would support that.
Captain, do we know if that's the case? I believe so. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Jordan?
I have a question on the rural internet. I may have overlooked it, but I didn't see a date that the RFP would be going out by. Has that been determined, and if so, what date might that be?
The date has yet to be determined. If I were to offer an assessment, it'll probably be sometime next week after the holiday. I was hoping if any of the city council members, the mayor, or anyone else on the dais that has any comments would provide those. The RFP will then be provided with those comments to the Rural Internet Access Committee. And once I have all of those, we'll return it to the consultant. The consultant is ready to proceed forward as soon as he gets a corrected draft.
And the next Rural Internet Access Committee meeting would be scheduled for when?
We were hoping for December. As you know, at the last Rural Internet Access Committee meeting, there was this discussion not just to meet to go over the request for proposals in its draft form, just to do it via email, but shortly thereafter to gather back together and see where we're at regarding the RFP and the initial responses, and then go from there on to the issue of the grant application now.
So, I'm sorry, could you clarify that your thought still is that the RFP, once you have the comments from the council, would be emailed to the committee, and then from there, would it require a meeting before the RFP would be distributed, or not?
Not.
Okay, so.
That's the direction I believe the committee members provided at the last meeting.
Right, the desire was to make it happen as soon as possible.
Correct.
So, based on that, then a December release of the RFP would be feasible?
That is the plan, both by the consultant and the department.
And were timelines established for the review of responses from the RFP?
The consultant's being realistic, as well as the department. Even if it were to get out at the beginning of December, it'd be hard to kind of press respondents with the holiday season, Christmas, New Year's coming shortly. The thought is to require a week or so after the holidays, so as they can work on it a bit before and then complete it after, and then submit it right at the first part of the new year.
So like beginning of January?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm not sure how much lead time you have, so it'd be great to have a meeting of the Rural Internet Council after that.
Certainly would.
Great. I think the only other item I have, just just to kind of put it out there, I know that I've had some one-off discussions with the city administrator as well as with you regarding the funding for any of these solutions. We've got the solutions in the RFP, plus I believe that Bays was poised to give an updated proposal. Is that correct? And I think they were going to do that irrespective of the RFP.
Yes, Bays ET has a proposal, or has been refining a proposal, to serve approximately 400 households in the south half of the city via fiber optic. I also received today from Mr. Bay of Bays ET what he believes is a pro forma to provide service to Shiloh, Homestead, and Three Sisters Farms subdivisions. So he's been very busy kind of putting together proposals, not necessarily with any thought about the grant application that was referenced by Councilmember Stevens, nor what our consultant's doing. And for the most part, we've encouraged Bays ET to proceed forward and tell us what they need when they get to a point where they have to stop.
I missed the last council meeting, but I was attending a National Multi-Housing Council Technology Committee, and actually had shared a meal with the head of AT&T, and I mentioned this RFP, and he indicated, I'll have to get his contact information to you, but he's willing to personally walk that through AT&T in case helpful, so we make sure it gets to the right people. I guess the last item I had is in terms of payment for it. I know there was some reference in the memo about the budget of $350,000 for rural internet, and the fact that it wouldn't come close to really any of the proposals, even the really low Bays ET one, or in my opinion, relatively low. And I wanted to, and it was mentioned on the online rural internet update as well. What I noticed is that there were references to, it might have been within the RFP, to options would have to be, discovered as people bid as to what actions the city would take to get funding to support that particular award. I just want to make sure, since it didn't mention any request to the council for funds, that at least that's the fact that it was not present in that memo. In your opinion, does it mean that that cannot be considered? I mean, with respect to my opinion, although it's millions, right, we as a city have spent that on pedestrian walkovers, we've done it on community parks, et cetera, and fourth utility to, a quarter of our resident population would be significant. So I just want to make sure that that's not off the table.
I think once we have a proposal that both the Rural Internet Access Committee and our consultant believe is appropriate and actually feasible, and we know all the hidden potential problems that surfaced when Charter was negotiating with the city in 2012, I'd like to think, and it's been the practice of past city councils, to rise to the occasion and find solutions. And so I would not see this as being any different.
Great.
It's an issue that crosses wards 1 and 6 almost entirely, but there are rural areas in 2, 3, and 8 as well. So a majority of the wards have an issue with high-speed internet.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
City Administrator Ansom, did you want to say anything in response to?
No, I think Director Vernich covered, at any given time during the year, if a need arises, we do have some reserve funds set aside to be able to address those types of situations. So that would obviously be a discussion for council and a vote at the appropriate time.
Could you get Joe the name and title of the person at AT&T so he can know that ahead of sending out the RFP?
Yes, I said that I would do that, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember McCutcheon.
Is this an appropriate time to make a motion regarding the domestic violence ordinance?
What would your motion be?
My motion would be to move that the city of Wildwood prepare legislation to adopt a domestic violence ordinance for the next council meeting.
I believe that would be in order. Second by Councilmember Eden. So the motion on the floor is to move forward with the preparation of legislation to be presented to the council that would adopt the domestic violence provision, making it a violation of our rules as well. Any discussion on the motion? Councilor McCune?
If we can get the language before we come to council to vote on it, I'd appreciate an email ahead of time.
Well, the agendas are always published ahead of time, so it would be with the packet, just like normal.
Sure, I just want to make sure that we can move it forward as soon as possible, but if there's some question on the language, I'd like to get ahead of that before the agenda is published.
If there's any question, we'll have the city attorney, without objection, provide the council notice of that ahead of time.
That's all I'm asking.
Okay.
Thanks.
See no further discussion. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Councilmember Edens?
I just had two things. One was just about the procedure for the motion, and that just got answered regarding domestic assault and abuse. Just really quick, Joe, I went through the RFP on the rural internet access. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to make sure I understood, because it looked like there was one line about wireless technology. And so is that the section of the RFP that includes 5G? Because it seems like we're mostly putting emphasis on technologies other than 5G. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
When the principal of the consulting firm visited Wildwood and did a presentation to the community as well as the Rural Internet Access Committee, she went through the list of options, and she was not endorsing a 5G program for the city of Wildwood. The description that was provided by Ms. Hovis is that it requires a number of poles, antennas, and the distances between those receiving points is very, very limited, given the strength of the signal, the type of signal, and that in Wildwood, with its topography, with its woodlands, that in the end it may not be the solution that will bring consistent, reliable, high-speed internet to the community. But the direction the department gave to the consultant is don't take anything off the table.
Okay.
If there's an option out there that would work for the most difficult last miles, the middle mile, let's put it out there and make sure we at least explore it.
Initially, I had wondered, because we passed the ordinance to be in alignment with state law regarding towers, and I didn't know if it would be more realistic, because we couldn't prevent another telecommunications company from using an existing tower. But it sounds like it's a moot point after what you just said, and
You know, it's kind of it's darn if you do and darn if you don't. In the rural areas, for many years, St. Louis County allowed overhead utilities, which works well with the propagation of a signal, a wireless signal. Thereafter, to preserve the beauty or aesthetics, they started requiring everything to be underground. So now we have a lot of subdivisions in the rural areas.
there is no tower to put it on.
There's no vertical
Okay.
property. So
There it is. Okay. Got it. And then I know we don't want to waste staff time with endeavors that aren't fruitful when we apply for grants. I know that it was in one of the emails I forwarded. The information I received was they're encouraging folks to apply for it regardless, because if you're turned down, they want to go back to the state and see we had X% of applicants that, couldn't receive it because there wasn't enough money to go around and justify to the legislature that there's a need for more money in the pot next year. So I don't want you to waste your time, but maybe before you make your decision about whether or not to apply for the grant with the RFP group, that you call the state and see if they think it's worth doing, even just to be turned down, just to help justify the need for the state.
Well, there's a couple of points there, and again, I don't want to take too much time, but I believe Mr. Jacqueline talked to the broadband director
Yeah.
from the Department of Economic Development, and he echoed the same sentiment to Mr. Jacqueline, that although this is the first round, we're not sure how it's going to turn out, but if there's a lot of applications and a lot of unfulfilled needs, that only spurs the legislature to do more. And that was emphasized also during the webinar. If you think you're not going to be eligible, go ahead and submit and let us make that decision. Don't predetermine your outcome.
And I think it does help make the case that we're left behind as a city, right? It's one more piece of evidence that that we are excluded because of the density or other things, and we're no longer a priority for the state or federal grants, and there is value to sort of being regrettably turned down, I would think, in making it, but that's, I can stop now. Thank you.
I almost see it as the same situation with the Watershed Erosion Task Force. If anything comes out of it, the next time someone from MSD stands at the podium and says we only have 2 problem areas in Wildwood, we'll be able to say, oh, no, you don't. We've identified 100. And we'll get them on the list then.
And they're rolling in now.
Yep.
Yeah, the locations. That's
Joe,
it.
before we leave the topic, since we're sending out the RFP at the middle of the holiday season, basically, which isn't necessarily optimal, but we don't want to wait. Simple thing like asking the consultant to let the recipients know ahead of time that it's arriving on their desk and have them on the lookout for it might carry the day with someone. So we could ask them to do that.
Doesn't get stacked in the pile of mail I'll open after the holiday.
Right. Okay, anything further from any member of the council relative to information items? All right, seeing none, moving to action items. The first is the 2020 city calendar. Mr. Ansel.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. As is tradition, we are presenting the 2020 calendar of events for council's review and discussion. And the information has been put together by staff led by our city clerk, Jessica Sturmlinger, who has worked closely with department heads over the past couple of months to put this calendar together. So we are submitting it to you this evening for discussion and potential approval so that we could get these events and items scheduled for 2020. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Edens.
Okay, so I noticed something earlier. I don't know if it requires an amendment, but we left out the date for the Lawn and Garden Summit on the city calendar. Julian will be able to confirm the date. I know we've already sent out save the dates in the newsletter. I did have a question about the economic development schedule. Typically our meetings are at 6:30. I think that works fairly well for the group, especially with commuters. But I noticed the January meeting and the February meeting we moved to 5:30. And then we switched back in March and April back to 6. And then randomly on October 27th, we're back at 5:30. And that may be because of the conflict with admin and public works. And, you know, I don't know who will be on committees then or if it's an issue. If it was me now, that would definitely be an issue with 2 standing committees. Do we have to have the economic development meetings at least in January and February at 5:30? Or could we move them back to our normal time?
Sorry, the thought with January and February was we also have the Parks and Planning Committee on that evening, so
it's harder. Is it harder for staff?
I'm sorry, understanding that some council members serve on both committees, giving that extra half-hour time for a council member to actually attend both of those meetings was the thought.
Okay, and that's what you were thinking then on October 27th as well? Because...
Most likely. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. And... Yep, other than that, and I noticed HPC didn't meet in March, which is fine, but it's also not on the Parks and Rec agenda about the Lawn and Garden Summit either, so I want to add it to both lists. Thank you.
We can make that correction.
Do you need a motion for that?
I don't think so.
We can do it editorially. We will need a motion to approve the calendar. We can do make that addition editorially.
Okay,
taking note of it. Councilor McCutcheon.
Sam, is that the same rationale for changing the times for planning and parks? At some points it's at 6:30 and other times it's at 7?
Most likely, yes. Mm-hmm. And Joe is nodding his head as well. Mm-hmm.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion to approve the calendar as presented and editorially modified? Made by Councilmember Dodwell. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Farmer. Any discussion on the motion? Councilmember Edens.
I forgot there was one more thing. I'm sorry. I noticed in December, economic development is on the 22nd, and that's certainly fine. As I'm thinking about this year and was looking forward to considering travel plans perhaps out of state, one thing I noticed is, you know, right before the holiday season in December, that's the only meeting that week. Now I guess potentially could move it to the 8th of December, but that doesn't give a lot of time between the last month. It's just worth a consideration if people travel for a full day and need to be somewhere before the 24th. It might be nice to not have a meeting that week. But if it doesn't work for staff, it doesn't work for staff. It just looks like you could pick the 22nd meeting up and move it to the 8th. Or the 15th or the 16th or something.
They will look at that and as needed modify it and,
Okay.
as you requested, and let everyone know.
Just an idea.
All right.
Thank you.
I think I saw another hand. Councilmember Ray.
I think the discussion springboards a little bit to some of the things we're going to talk to at the end of this meeting, if that's okay.
Actually, as soon as the vote is taken, I was going to suggest that it might be logically better if we had that discussion now and rearrange the agenda, because I was suspecting there might be some relationship to that. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. So without objection from the council, the item under miscellaneous that Councilmember Remy had raised relative to board and commission meetings that seems to be relating to this item. If there's no objection, we could handle that now since it relates to the same topic. Is there any objection to doing that? All right, seeing none, Councilmember Remy.
Sure. In full disclosure, I think I was assigned this, but from the meeting, but I don't think necessarily it's just me. So we discussed at the Admin Public Works meeting that there are a lot of committee and commission meetings for worthwhile causes, but perhaps with the city employees' limited time, and frankly also council members, as we're hearing that they've got double meetings in some evenings, we wanted to at least engage a conversation among council about potentially in 2020 discussing triaging some of these meetings that may or may not need to happen monthly. Certainly not talking about planning and zoning and admin public works and parks and planning, but some of the other ones. And so I think Administrator Anselm was going to look into, first of all, what their thoughts were at the city side. I'd love to hear that and then open up that dialogue to see if other individuals think that we maybe want to adjust the 2020 schedule to prioritize what commissions for which months may have more timeliness and relevance at that moment. Is that a fair characterization from our conversations?
Have you done that yet?
Yes.
Okay, so City Administrator Anselm.
Yeah, so we do appreciate the opportunity to provide some input into the schedule of meetings for 2020 and beyond. With your note in recognizing that some of these committees are ordinance enabled, so there's very little flexibility we have in terms of moving meetings. We can schedule them in different days and times, but reached out to several employees who represent the city on these boards and commissions, and we really only found two that might have an opportunity for some discussion. One of them was the Board of Public Safety, and in having a conversation with our city marshal and Captain Mundell, as well as Public Works Director Rick Brown, there was a suggestion that perhaps the Board of Public Safety could move to an every other month schedule, but with the exception of while the Deer Task Force Subcommittee is doing its work, maybe having just a subcommittee meeting 1 month and then the following month having the Board of Public Safety meeting, and then kind of alternate those two until the Deer Task Force has resolved itself, and then the Board of Public Safety would move to an every other month schedule. And then the other item, which we are going to actually take up at the Economic Development Committee meeting next week, or actually tomorrow evening, is a discussion about the Economic Development Group perhaps moving to an every other month schedule. But those were really the only two that we recognized as having the opportunity to maybe switch up.
So it seems like it might be in order to have a brief memo prepared to the council from you, Sam, with that information. I guess the question I have for the council is whether you would like that information presented to Admin Public Works or to the council as a whole for a review and maybe amendment to the calendar. What are your thoughts on that? Councilmember Edens.
One of the things that I remember from our discussion is it also, as Councilmember Remy said, it arose out of being double booked for meetings. I know it's happened to several of us, and I'm still not clear as to what the council would prefer the procedure to be. I mean, I know I mentioned that, economic development is scheduled at the same time as public works next year. If that would have happened this year and something like that's already happened to me, do I have an obligation to run back and forth? Am I supposed to pick one meeting? I mean, can I rotate in and out for voting? These are just, sorry, no, that's okay. I would just like this admin and public works and the council to sort of think about, is it up to us as council members which one we attend? Do we split our time? I mean, unless short of a cloning machine, I'm not really sure
Yeah.
what to do.
There should not be meetings of the standing committees scheduled to overlap.
Well, but that's what'll happen in December because we won't get out in an hour and Public Works will start.
Then I would suggest we look at that, because I don't think that's fair to the council. The votes at these meetings are recorded. And I know time it can be tough to put these things in order and get them done on a timely basis, but you know, the council has the recorded attendance that's made public, and I just don't think it's fair to the council to have meetings scheduled where you're having to choose between which you want to be reported to as absent. So.
Well, and I mean, it's less of an issue. Like I've had HPC and creek erosion on the same night, and I've just made a decision because I'm a liaison on one and a committee member on the other that, you know, I show up at the one that I'm voting on, and so, but I understand there has to be some overlap. There's been open houses when we've been on creek erosion. I've ran back and forth between Board of Public Safety when there's residents with issues, and whenever you're double booked, it feels like you're doing a little bit of everything and doing nothing well. Yeah. Or at least that's the feeling I have when I run back and forth between
And I don't know that we can
rooms.
schedule every meeting not to overlap.
No, I know that.
The
I just
standing committees.
It's just standing committees. Okay,
So,
thank you.
Do we have a vote on the motion that's on the floor at this point, Ms. Strimlinger, to approve the calendar? We did. I thought we did. Okay. All right. Councilmember McCune.
Just to piggyback on what you were saying on the double book, maybe Mayor, depending on the election in April, maybe look at the committees and making sure that we maybe diversify the wards evenly for each committee or commission that we're assigned to, because I know that that's the power that the mayor has. But maybe as a council as a whole, I think that if we divide it up, then one council member is assigned to 3 committees and the other one's not. Maybe we have more of a balance, and maybe, you know, the 2 council people can work together to see what works best for them as well. So maybe that will minimize some of your overlapping as well. So just a consideration. Nothing now, but for April, it might be something to consider.
So what does the council wish? The report from the city administrator to come back to Admin Public Works? That might be more logical. Is there consensus with that?
Sorry.
Okay. And in that report, I would ask, Sam, you mentioned that when the city team looked at what what the response would be relative to, you know, the issue that's been raised by the committee or Councilor Remy, that some meetings were off limits because of ordinance. I guess I would suggest without objection, if there are any of those that you think should be modified in terms of whether the meetings are necessary, then let's have that discussion as a council. We can always change the ordinance. Any objection to that? Okay. All right, so that'll go to Admin Public Works. All right, thank you. Moving next to Director of Planning and Parks, the 2020 Recreation Events Calendar. Joe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, as has been the past practice of the Planning and Parks Committee, to present to the City Council the proposed recreation schedule for the upcoming fiscal year once the members of that committee have completed its review. The Planning and Parks Committee did review the proposed schedule of events at its last meeting this month. There was a good deal of discussion regarding several of the major recreation events, obviously one being the Celebrate Wildwood and the Art Festival. As you know, those were split in 2018. That split has increased the cost because of the duplicity of certain items, and as part of the committee's discussion, the 2 were reunited, so to speak, so as to work within the budget that's being proposed for the event. Additionally, the back-to-school party was discussed as well, given its proximity to the Celebrate Wildwood event, and there will be some minor changes to that, but those changes, I think, will reflect location potentially more than anything else. We are thinking about having it at Community Park in the Great Meadow area, now that construction will be done here in about a week or so on Phase 3. Also, I think it's important to note that the schedule does not reflect the barbecue bash. That is not to say that the barbecue bash is not planned. As you know, the 2020 budget still shows an allocation toward that event, but there are just so many questions relative to the organizer, the reduction in the amount that's being set aside by the city, timing in terms of the event itself, that it just didn't seem appropriate from the department's perspective to place it on the calendar without knowing a little bit more information and receiving some additional commitments. So I want to assure you that the Barbecue Bash is still a component of the city's calendar. It's just not on the recreation event calendar because of the uncertainty associated with it. Hopefully you've had a chance to review the list of events. Many of them are carryovers from many years now and popular with our residents and visitors to the city, and the department would respectfully request an endorsement of the schedule as presented by the Planning and Parks Committee from its meeting in November.
So that would be a motion to approve, correct, Joe?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Councilor Stevens?
I would really like to see the barbecue bash be added back to the parks schedule. And I'd be willing to make that motion to make that happen. As far as paying for it, I think that's where the big uncertainty lies, is just the money aspect. From what I can see, I think that there are ways that we can do it within the budget already. Maybe even combining the third concert series with the back to school party. I think we could save somewhere in the range of $5,000 to $6,000 there. The ICSC involvement, that's one that I think that we should have gotten out of a long time ago. There was a golf tournament for like $800. The passport program we could turn over to the WBA after we kind of helped get it off the ground. I think there's a lot of opportunities to still move some money around in the budget and have this signature event stay in Wildwood. I think that it's something that the residents have they've come to count on it, every fall. So I don't know if you need a motion to add it back to the event calendar. I know it's in the budget and I know it's on the city calendar, but I would really like to see it get some budget discussion when we go to approve the budget. And also I would like some more confidence that it's going to happen in Wildwood. So do I need to make a motion to add it back?
You can do that, but before you do, I guess I would just offer for information. As you said, it's in the budget, so it is, assuming that happens, it's going to be there. And as Joe said, there's been no plan to cancel the barbecue bash. That's one thing. But secondly, relative to funding, the issue of finding other funds wasn't really part of the discussion relative to what's been presented to the council. What was presented to the council relative to the barbecue bash budget was whether it was appropriate for the city to be paying for some of the things that seem most logically to be required of the particular sponsor for that event. So,
correct. And I had made motions when I was on the Planning and Parks Committee to not increase funding for it and to ask them to do their own funding. So I'm well aware of the funding for it. But if we go back to the organizer and say, hey, I know we've been putting in $50,000 a year the last year or two, and now here's $35,000 to make it happen. It's not going to happen. So the budget aspect is the most important aspect of keeping the barbecue bash here. So yeah. I think it's important. I would make the motion to add it back to the calendar and direct staff to find the money for it.
Okay, we'll have your motion. We don't know what the vendor's going to say, actually.
Well, they're going to say no if it's at $35,000. That's what.
Is there a second to the motion to add barbecue bash onto the calendar?
I'll make that second.
Okay, we have a second from Councilmember Werther to add it onto the calendar. Councilmember Councilmember Dodwell.
I was going to make a motion to approve the calendar, but we have another motion.
You can amend or set aside, whichever you prefer.
Okay, let's amend it without the barbecue bash on it so that we can continue having discussions with the purveyor of that event. And we've had comments from staff that they are very committed to making it happen. We may have to change some arrangements, but I want to make sure that we move forward with this particular calendar. I also want to say thank you very much for moving the art festival and the Celebrate Wildwood into October so that we can have some more comfortable weather to enjoy our city and celebrate the fact that we are an incorporated entity here and have been close to all of the residents. So I would like to approve it as is and leave the barbecue bash off and remove that component.
Just a point of order.
What is your point of order?
If I make an amendment and then someone else comes back and makes the exact opposite amendment, don't I get to vote on the amendment that was seconded first?
Yeah, we should be voting on his amendment.
No, she can make the motion, it's in order, and you would vote against her amendment, and we'd go back to yours as a main motion.
I don't think that's correct,
Because, City Attorney?
The amendment is the original plan.
Correct.
So why would we?
I know, I voted to amend the original plan. Do I get a vote
Amending
on
a
my
plan,
amendment
Councilor
first before
Stevens,
we?
Councilor Stevens, amending a plan is not amending a motion. Your motion, which is a main motion, is to amend the calendar that's been presented. That is a main motion. It is amendable.
City Attorney, can you answer that question for me, please?
Technically, for his motion, there should be a main motion to approve what's been proposed, and then have him make a motion to amend that motion.
So he's not able to amend the calendar that's been presented?
There should be an initial motion to approve what's being presented, and then his motion would be an amendment to that.
Also, just
Hold
for
on.
clarification on my point of order, if I make a motion, do I get a vote on that before someone just removes my amendment? If I get a second on it, shouldn't I have a vote on that before it just gets taken right off the table?
Yeah, we've done that before.
Yeah, I think we've amended things presented before, too. We haven't had a motion to present stuff, but we'll do it that way. I mean, that's fine. So without objection, we'll take Councilor Dodwell's motion first and then Councilor Stevens' motion second. So the motion on the floor is to approve the calendar as presented. Is there a second to the motion to approve the calendar as presented? Made by Councilmember McCutcheon.
Okay.
Discussion on the motion. Councilor Stevens, there are other people on the list.
I know,
and
but
soon-
would this
And
be
as
the
soon
point
as
where
we
I
get to
make-
other people, we'll come back to you. Councilor McCune.
So I might need help from Joe Garatano. So when we were in committee, or anybody else that was there, I guess I'm just a little confused on, I hear this amended motion. What's the risk of just adding it to the calendar? So what risk or harm are we doing by adding it that we're getting in this big debate, even though if it can or cannot be funded, or if we're still researching it? So I just think that we're really picking at something that shouldn't be there, but there was a reason that I would like somebody to comment when we were in committee of what we actually voted on to say that why we removed it. So there's just two questions that I would like to have further clarification since we have an amendment coming.
We voted on the calendar as it was. So the absence of the barbecue bash didn't mean that we took it off. It wasn't there, and that's what we voted
Okay.
for.
We have Councilmember Jordan. Did you get your question answered? You were asking it to the city administrator, or?
Whoever wants to answer, so I had two questions.
Okay, and what's your first question again, Councilor McCune?
What is the risk of adding it now?
Joe?
The department, in presenting to the committee the other evening, noted that we begin the production of the recreation schedules in 2019 for 2020. We do that because one of our events starts on January 11th, so there's a need to start producing the documentation, getting the information on the website, et cetera, with that assurance that City Council's endorsed it. So it's just a practical matter of timing. What is the risk? I don't assess a risk to it. It is funded in the 2020 proposed budget. It's just, again, without talking to the organizer in detail about the cost decrease on the side of the city and the cost increase to him, I'm just not sure how it'll all play out. It may end up being a 2-day event instead of 3 days. It may be a 1-day event instead of 3 days. There may be a change in approach. Those things were discussed at the last barbecue bash because there's kind of a transition going on. A lot of the barbecue teams that have been there for 15 years, they're aging out, and the folks that are replacing them aren't in the same numbers, and they're younger, and the 3-day commitment isn't necessarily the same as some of the older barbecue teams.
Sure.
So we're just seeing a change, and the thought was, instead of forcing the issue and trying to resolve it in a week or two, let's just present the recreation calendar, minus it, fund it, but for the most part, we could then make our publications.
So just to follow up, is there any, I get exactly what you're saying, but for the public and for the concern of what's being presented here and what we're hearing from social media, is that they see that it's removed and they don't understand that it's still funded. Is there a risk of putting it on the calendar and put in parentheses tentative? Or some little disclaimer? Does that make everybody happy? Or do you think that that's unnecessary? I'm just trying to meet in the middle, so when residents ask questions, it is on the calendar, however, it is tentative based on whatever disclaimer you guys want to put on it. Does that satisfy?
At the direction of City Council, we'll be glad to do whatever the majority
So
would
I'll
like.
ask the council if you guys want to look at that, maybe.
So if that's what you want to do, then you would cast your vote accordingly. Councilmember Jordan?
So one of the things I noticed on here is that there are at least 5 events related to hiking and trails, running, and there's not any events dedicated to the equestrians in Wildwood, of which there's, a large population demographic that enjoys that. I'm not ready tonight to propose or suggest a date or anything, but would we need to replace one of those to insert something like that, or can it be added instead? We'll be having a economic development meeting tomorrow, and I've got some people coming in with ideas of events that we could do within the city to satisfy that group. And anyway, I just would like to understand.
I think the strength of Wildwood's recreational calendar is we've removed events that have become less popular, and we've added events, and if they are popular, we stay with them until that popularity wanes. I can think of probably 1 or 2 that if an equestrian event were proposed, we could certainly insert it and revise the calendar, freshen it up, and keep people engaged in the things they enjoy. So
Okay,
I
great.
don't see an issue.
I just asked that,
2020 might be difficult, but certainly in 2021, if there's an interest, we can move in that direction and move it with some authority.
I would ask that we, try in 2020 to at least insert one event for that group. I just think it's high time that we do it, and I'm open to, discussing with you later what those might be.
Well, I was planning on attending tomorrow night's economic development meeting,
perfect.
so I could hear
Sure.
from the equestrian community, just like the rest of the committee members.
Awesome, that'd be perfect.
Councilmember Stevens, thank you for your patience.
So can I go ahead and make my motion to amend now?
You can.
Okay, I would make a motion to add the barbecue bash back to the calendar because the city should show a commitment first to the organizer. If the organizer can't get the funds or doesn't want to, or they pull out, that's a different story. But I really feel like the city and the city council should commit to having the barbecue bash in 2020. So I would make a motion to add it back to the calendar. And I'll also make my suggestions on the budget on how to fund it at the appropriate time.
Is there a second to the motion to amend? Second by Councilmember Werther. So discussion is on the amendment to the main motion. Councilmember Edens? I'm sorry.
Just to clarify,
Hold on. Councilmember Remy was next. Sorry.
Could you just give us the numbers? What was last year's cost for the barbecue bash from the city's perspective in totality, and then what are the intended prospective costs coming forward, if it's a 3-day as previous?
The 3-day event this year was approximately $50,000. The proposed budget for 2020, again, assuming a 3-day event, is $35,000, so a reduction of about $16,000. The organizer has said that it's much more difficult to draw the large sponsors now versus the past, and so the event hasn't gone into the red, but certainly has been very close.
Just a follow-up question to that question. If it goes to a 2-day, what's the difference in cost?
I think there's a change in, obviously, staffing from the perspective of the police. There's less rental for portable restroom facilities, wash stations, electrical. Those are major components, and it's one less day of the shuttle service, which is also expensive. So although the reduction may not appear to bring cost savings, there is substantial amount.
other issues.
Councilmember Dodwell.
A secondary motion.
We've had a lot of discussion. We've got several different activities that we as a city are doing that are not on this calendar. And I appreciate all of the discussion about additional equestrian activities, additional things that we have talked about in economic development. I think we just move forward with the calendar as is, and that's where my vote's going to go.
Okay. Councilmember Edens.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify with the amendment or motion on the floor. If we're physically writing in on the date that we think the barbecue bash would be and then writing tentative, sometimes when you schedule things and then move it, it could look like you don't have your ducks in a row. So what if we just did a general blanket statement with an asterisk at the bottom of the month that the city is committed to working with the host of the barbecue bash to find a potential future date rather than putting it on their calendar and then moving it, because sometimes people block things out, or it could just make us look inefficient, but then that would fix the concerns of the residents because they know it's coming. And you can include other things. You can include the equestrian. I would just do a one sentence thing, put an asterisk and call it a day, rather than physically blocking off dates on a calendar and then moving it, because we haven't talked to the promoter. The whole point is to work with the promoter. So it would alleviate concerns of constituents. It's being considered. We're just, do I have to amend that to do that, or is the motion on the floor to write it on the date?
I think the motion on the floor, if it fails, would take care of your concern potentially, but if it doesn't, once it fails, you could go back on the main motion and make that as an amendment.
So could I amend what's on the
Well,
no, that's okay. It's
Councilmember Garitano.
All right. I love the barbecue bash. Love going there. I love my burnt ends and love spending time over there walking around and getting to see the entertainment. I didn't think of it, but when Councilmember Edens brought up sort of what as I was thinking as she was speaking about, sort of like a TBD or to be determined, maybe footnote somewhere in the calendar. That might be the compromise that I think would be reasonable. I don't want to set the false expectation until we know for sure what the plan is, because it's really putting the cart before the horse if we go ahead and put something on the calendar without knowing if it's feasible, if the math and the numbers work out. I would love to see it work out. I'm open to hearing the ideas of what we can do to make it happen. But I think before we put it on, it would make sense. And the calendar, the 2020 calendar, I just picked mine up today. So I haven't even looked to see it, if it's in there. But would we just be talking about adding it to the website then at this point? Is that what it is, Joe?
Website, the e-newsletter, any publications that we do, maybe at each quarter, half year, etc. But again, the intent isn't to say the barbecue bash isn't going to occur. It's more just this is the rec schedule for publication purposes. Okay. Our city calendar.
City Clerk Sturmlinger, did you want to say something?
So I just wanted to make sure on the city calendar, we do have barbecue bash TBD on there. And Mr. Vunich spoke to that earlier. So I don't know, since we already approved the calendar as it is in our last motion, how would that work with this motion?
I think I don't consider them mutually exclusive because to be determined means it gets on a calendar once a date's set. So, right. But thank you for raising that. Okay, councilors, we've had a lot of discussion on this. Councilmember Stevens, do you have anything you want to speak again? Do you have anything new to add?
No, Ms. Sturmlinger just made my point that we had already approved the dates on the previous vote, so it should go on the event calendar as well.
Okay, she was making a point of information. Councilmember McCutcheon?
I was going to refer to what Jessica just said. To be determined, put it on the website. If constituents are asking for an explanation, just put it on the explanation.
Okay. So the motion on the floor is to amend the calendar by adding barbecue bash. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Show of hands, all in favor, please show your hands. This is to put barbecue bash on the calendar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, motion carries. We'll do any opposed? Raise your hand for opposed. Councilmember Farmer, McCutcheon, Grignani, and Dodwell. Any abstentions? Motion carries. So now we're back to the main motion, which is the calendar as presented with the amendment. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion, main motion as amended, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We have one opposed. Councilmember McCutcheon. Any other opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Okay. Last item is just an idea that I wanted to present to the council. There was some discussion at the last meeting about the calendar and actually whether we do the calendar or not in terms of getting our residents to participate in a contest at limited cost and to hopefully encourage them to come to City Hall and be more environmentally friendly with our photos. So the idea you have in the that I presented in the memo would be that we take the contest that we have currently with respect to the calendar, and this isn't mutually exclusive, but also do it, I guess, on a more electronic basis and honor the people who win and leave it not to get down into the details. Joe does a great job with this in his department, but whatever the winners are, we invite them and recognize them and also put maybe the top 10 to 15 or so around City Hall so residents could come and enjoy them. So it's just an idea I wanted to present. Councilmember Remy.
It's raising my hand because I was supposed to speak on the last thing, but I didn't get called upon at the end.
Okay.
That was about the Founders Day Parade, which we didn't talk about today.
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. We actually have the gates for the dog park. Well, let's see where the discussion goes relative to the photography contest. Councilmember Edens.
Oh, I was just going to say, when we do the city booth at the art fair, since you're already printing them and displaying them, let's bring the art winners and put them out at the art fair.
Okay. So the concept is not to get down in the details of exactly how we do it. I think we have people here that we trust to do it, but that we have this type of contest, and the principal difference would be that we do it on a more electronic basis, put them at City Hall, the winners, so people our residents can come to City Hall and see those, and honor them, the top winners here at one of our council meetings.
And also that I don't want to take credit for Don's idea, but we were thinking it would be nice to have some sort of display at the art festival.
At the art festival. Okay. So you want to make a motion, Councilmember Edens, to do this?
Yes, I suppose in the city booth.
All right.
It would be nice to either I don't know if the motion is, if it's electronic, to have a screen that displays the photograph and
well,
the name of the
I would be looking for a motion to have this contest and that be part of it.
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion? Second by Councilmember Garetano. Discussion on the motion. Councilmember Werther.
As is our practice with any new event that we have within the city, there is a format as well as procedure to follow for that. So I would recommend that this be referred to the Planning and Parks Committee so it can go ahead and follow that procedure to get all the details flushed out.
Okay, we have a motion to refer to Planning and Parks. Is there a second to the motion to? We have a second to refer by Councilmember Edens. Any discussion on the motion to refer? See no discussion on the motion to refer. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Will be referred to Planning and Parks. Okay, dog park interior gates replacement. Joe, we've got a few minutes here. If you want to move forward with that, we'll see where it goes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, the Planning and Parks Committee gave the department a couple of homework assignments relating to this particular item. We've not completed those as of today, so the department would respectfully request a postponement tonight.
Someone like to make a motion to postpone this item, made by Councilmember Kuhn, second by Councilmember Dodwell. All in favor of the motion to postpone, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Motion carries. All right, so that takes us to adjournment. I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Maybe Councilmember Remy, seconded by Councilmember Garetano, non-debatable. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So we have adjourned the work session, and we will convene the main meeting of the council in about 2 minutes. Thank you. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the City Council for the City of Wildwood for Monday, November 25th, 2019. Ms. Strimlinger, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Bolin,
Here.
Councilmember Stevens,
Here.
Councilmember McCune,
Here.
Councilmember Boat, Councilmember Bertolino, Councilmember Dodwell,
Here.
Councilmember Remy,
Present.
Councilmember Edens, here, Councilmember Brost,
Here.
Councilmember Garitano,
Present.
Councilmember Werther,
Present.
Councilmember Jordan,
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember Dillard,
Here.
Councilmember Bartoni,
Here.
Councilmember Gragnani.
Here.
Okay, thank you and welcome everyone. For those of you that are with us this evening in the audience, thanks for being here. If you have a cell phone or other electronic device that is on, if you'd be so kind as to turn it to silent while we're in session, we would appreciate it. And for those of you that are comfortably able, if you would please stand with us to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of minutes from the Council's November 12, 2019 work session and regular agenda. If there are no questions or comments on those, I would entertain a motion to approve those. Councilmember Stevens.
I had made a motion, but it didn't get a second on one of the bills. Is that normally recorded in the minutes at least, or does that get left out since I didn't get a second? I don't know who Jessica, if you know, I don't know.
Ms. Strumlinger.
If it doesn't get a second, it doesn't get recorded typically.
I was just
And
curious.
John Young, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
So I believe there was a second reading was getting a vote, and it didn't get a second, but it was in the minutes, so I just didn't know.
Okay, well, that's because we published bills, and so since they're published, they have to be included in the minutes, I believe. But City Attorney Young.
Yeah, in terms of the bill, I believe it was there was a motion and a second for a second reading, and it failed. And that's what was recorded.
Oh,
Is that-
gotcha. Yeah.
So that would be the distinction.
Correct. Okay, just curious. Thank you.
So does anyone wish to make a motion to approve the minutes? Made by Councilmember Remy, seconded by Councilmember McCune. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Aye.
Councilmember Dillard and Councilmember Jordan abstain. Any other abstentions? All right, motion carries. Moving next to public comment, it's a valuable component of our meeting. Anyone who wishes to speak must complete a speaker card and provide it to the city clerk, who is seated to your left of the podium. When your name is called, please approach the podium and state your name and your ward. To ensure that all who wish to speak have the opportunity to do so, there is a 5-minute time limitation, and I will let you know when the time limit is reached. If you have any questions for us, please mention that during your remarks and identify the official you would like to respond. That official will make note of it, and at the conclusion of public participation, any official who chooses to respond will have 3 minutes to do so as to all questions directed to that official. The official may choose to respond to your questions after tonight's meeting, and we may also post any responses on the City Council page of our website. And finally, please be respectful to others in making your remarks. Interrupting others and using profane and abusive language are prohibited, and I want to thank everyone in advance for following these. First speaker card, please.
David Hudson, Ward 1.
David Hudson, Ward 1. I thank the mayor and council for allowing me to speak regarding the packet placed at your desks tonight. I presented the information in the packet at the November 18, 2019 Planning and Zoning meeting, but it was omitted from the PZ 1517 Receive and File on tonight's agenda. I will summarize the packet information, but respectfully request that you read it as well. The packet contains my P&Z comments, a review of the water test results by the Water Quality Monitoring Section Chief of Missouri Department of Natural Resources, and a MoDNR explanation of the statutory designation for nutrient-impaired lake. We are extremely grateful that the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Planning Department performed water tests of the lake and waterfall, which confirmed the presence of harmful algal bloom toxin, microcystin, which can cause the unique symptoms we have experienced since the waterfall was first turned on in May of 2017. A few days after the first exposure, I notified the city that an HAB toxin may be responsible. In March 2018, the petitioner submitted his water test, which revealed high phosphorus level, and I again notified the city of the potential of HAB toxin. Had the petitioner asked MoDNR to assess his lake at that time, it would have saved the citizens of Wildwood, over $4,000 and a year and a half of delay, since MoDNR would have done the analysis itself. The recent water tests found that the lake and waterfall have very high levels of algae, phosphorus, and nitrogen that would put them in the impaired category shared by only 34 other Missouri lakes. This impairment, without treatment, ensures ongoing algal blooms and toxins. All the experts reviewing the water tests reported the EPA drinking water health advisory level for adults is 1.6 micrograms per liter. I did not see mention of the HA level for young children, which is 0.3 micrograms per liter, lower than that in the level that is found in the lake and the lake. But no one is going to drink the water from the lake. An NIH article reports that in animal studies, microcystin is 70 times more toxic when breathed than when swallowed. Inhalation is the toxin path created by the waterfall. A U.S. congressional hearing notes that HAB toxins are among the most potent toxins known. They cause death at dosage levels in the low parts per billion range. They are more potent than strychnine, curare, and sarin. One of the toxins is equivalent in potency to cobra venom. Only a few toxins are more potent, such as botulinum and ricin. As little as a mouthful of lake water containing HAB toxins can have immediate lethal and sublethal health effects. Allowing this waterfall to be operated as an experiment on our health without removing the toxin is beyond unethical. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
Jason Christensen.
Jason Christensen, 514 Mission Bay Drive. Come to you tonight as actually the city administrator of Frontenac, and at the request of Mayor Hatfield in Frontenac to discuss some concerns that I think are felt around the county about the St. Louis County Library District. By way of some background, you might have read the county recently purchased some properties in Frontenac, four residential properties for over $6 million, and the properties were appraised at just over $2 million. They're trying to move forward with a large 82,000 square foot administrative building and a warehouse complex to house 175 employees, bookmobile operations, all within a residential part of the city. And this is despite the strong objections of the community and the Planning and Zoning Commission there. And also all while the library board members were serving under expired terms. And so I have a brief statement to read from Mayor Hatfield. She's out at other cities. Our board members are out visiting other cities tonight as well, so they couldn't be here. But earlier this month, County Executive Sam Page made the decision to appoint 4 new library board trustees. We hope this will be a good move toward the future. We need your help to continue to seek a transparent, predictable, and accountable future for the use of Prop L funded projects throughout St. Louis County. Why should you care about this? After promising to be a good neighbor, the library director and board president maintain that the library is going to do what they believe the Missouri statutes allow them to do anywhere they want in St. Louis County using taxpayer dollars. While the legal argument is about the powers bestowed on the library by Missouri statutes, the real question is what is needed for the Library Board of Trustees to do what is right, to assure collaboration with local municipalities and on all library projects, so that municipalities can assure public safety, fiscal accountability, and transparency for the benefit of all residents. The county executive has replaced library board trustees. I hope we can count on your support to continue to seek transparency, improved oversight, and predictable outcomes for county taxpayer Prop L funded projects by actively supporting County Councilman Tim Fitch's request for County Council oversight on the Prop L budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker card, please.
That was the last speaker card.
Okay, thank you. And thanks to all of you, or the 2 of you who came tonight to speak during public participation. Moving next into mayor's announcements and appointments. There are 3 appointments. The first is move of Mr. Alan Bockert from Ward 6, who is currently an alternate on our Historic Preservation Commission, to a permanent position that is vacated by Mr. Compton. He is with us this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions. If you have none, I would entertain a motion to approve his move from an alternate to a permanent position. Made by Councilmember Jordan. Is there a second? Made by Councilmember Bowe. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Moving next to our CID board, Community Improvement District. So I provided the council with a memorandum relative to my thoughts on the composition of the board, and it essentially, as I mentioned in my memo, so this board, for everyone's background, involves overseeing the bonds and other items associated with part of our town center just northeast of us. And as I mentioned in my memo, historically, we've had the city administrator and our director of planning sit on that board, and Mr. Anselm and I have discussed the potential for difficulty that places a city employee in by virtue of putting that city employee in an appointed position. And we are both in agreement that that is not a good thing to do to our city employees. Second, we have never had, other than council members to my knowledge, a resident who is not elected but is nevertheless willing to serve and has the qualifications to serve to be part of it. And I think that it's a good idea to involve our residents that want to participate in these types of things. And third, continuing with the inclusion of a slightly greater balance of representation on the part of Ward 8, because that is where our town center rests, I think is a good idea, and what I presented to you tonight does that. In fact, the resident member who is with us this evening, Mr. Mark Pilkington, thank you for being here, Mark. He is from Ward 8. And finally, given that Ward 5 is adjacent to this area, and frankly just as close as a practical matter to many that are in Ward 8, it seemed to make sense to bring the expertise of Councilmember Bertolino to the table. And so with all of that in mind, as you see in the memo, I'm recommending the reappointment of our city treasurer, Steve Cross, the appointment of council members Dave Bertolino from Ward 5 and Joe Garitano as Mayor Pro Tem, which has also historically happened, and resident Mark Pilkington be approved, and that would leave Mr. Vinich continuing in his term until 2021. So I'm happy to entertain any questions about the background on that and my thoughts on it. If you don't have any questions, I would ask for a motion to approve the slate as presented. Councilmember Edens?
Yep, I just have a question. I understand what you're saying, except for, as we're talking about it being a conflict of interest for city employees, at the same time, Steve Cross is still an employee and we're reappointing him? Is that because...
So he's an appointed official of the city. And
Okay.
at number one. And number two, I don't know, I didn't mention conflict. I'm not concerned about, I'm concerned about conflicts of interest, but my thought wasn't relative to potential conflicts on the part of interest, and if that's what you're referring to, on the part of city employees. My concern is that we would essentially, we're placing a city employee and their livelihood with us, depending on the issues and things that could come up before the board, at risk by having them in that position.
So the difference is Steve Cross is appointed
I have you,
and
Councilmember Werther.
paid, whereas this, as opposed to a full-time employee that is salary and benefit. And,
Well, Steve Cross is an appointed official.
right, that still is technically, like, we're still city employees too. So I'm just trying to make sure I get the logic tightened down a little bit, but I certainly don't have a problem with them being on there. I just wanted to make sure I understood the differentiation between.
I guess I would say, from a practical standpoint, my thought process related to what I would call pure employees, what we typically think of in terms of employees. Those whose livelihood depends on their working at this city, for example, and Steve Cross is not in that capacity, even if he were an employee, quote unquote.
And he's comfortable with serving on this and would like to continue?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for your question. Councilmember Greg Nani.
Yeah, the conflict of interest question was interesting because I was going to ask something about that, but I think I'd rather have something else happen if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to hear from Council Members Garitano and Bertolino about how they feel about this, because potentially they're dealing with development in the CID district, which could present some issues about their conflicts of interest, and I'm just wondering how they feel about being potentially put in that position.
Without objection from the council, we will do them in alpha order. Councilmember Bertolino, would you like to say anything relative?
No, John, I'm not quite sure I understand what conflict might arise, but in thinking this over, no, I don't believe there's any conflict. I have a genuine interest, obviously, in development of the city, and look forward to serving on the board.
Councilor Garitano, anything you would like to mention?
Sure. Serving on the SID, development items are not brought to the SID. What we serve is as stewards for that common area that's within the boundaries of the SID. So like the city property, like the clock tower, the items along the sidewalks, I think some of the landscaping, the outlets on the trees, and the city parking garage is probably our biggest item there. So for us, it's acting as stewards to make sure that we're maintaining the garage. And the CID is an independent body, and it's funded through the taxes that these properties here within those CID boundaries pay, and that's how we can maintain that. So yeah, I don't see any crossing of paths between development at all.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Werther.
Thank you. Mr. Anselm, on the bonds that were issued for the Community Improvement District, we have approximately, 4.5, maybe 5 years left on those?
That sounds about right.
Okay. So, and those were 20-year bonds?
I believe so.
Okay, so it's clear then that for the past roughly 15 years, the process and the parties that have been participating as the board have done so, and I can speak to some history here, in a stellar fashion, ensuring both the integrity of the Community Improvement District and ensuring the integrity of the operations of that Community Improvement District, all the while maintaining the fountain, the parking garage, and other facilities as part of that. So let's not lose that as we consider these appointments.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve the appointments as presented. Made by Councilmember Stevens, seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We have one opposed, Councilmember McCune. Any other opposed? Any abstentions? And Mr. Pilkington, congratulations. You are the first resident member of our CID board. Thank you for stepping to the plate. Appreciate it. All right, last is to our Board of Public Safety. We just had a resignation from board member Dave Williams by virtue of work issues. And so I'm presenting tonight Mr. Jeff Baker from Ward 3, who has an interest in doing this. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to entertain those. Otherwise, I would ask for a motion to approve the appointment made by Councilmember Remy. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Dillard. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, and he is with us this evening in the back. Thank you, Mr. Baker, for being here. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Congratulations, Mr. Baker. You're a new member of the Board of Public Safety. And thank you for approval of those and particularly walking through all the issues with the CID board. Moving next into legislation, our first bill for second reading is Bill 2519. It's before the council for final passage. It concerns all wards. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Dodwell. Is there a second? Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Bartoni. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Sturmlinger, please read Bill 2519.
Bill 2519, an ordinance of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor of the City of Wildwood to negotiate and execute certain public roads, right-of-ways, and park maintenance agreements on behalf of the City of Wildwood with certain contractors for public roads, right-of-ways, and park maintenance within the City of Wildwood.
Thank you. Rick, do you have anything further you'd like to mention relative to this bill for the benefit of the council?
No, Mayor, I have nothing further to add, but I'm built for any questions or comments.
All right. Any questions or comments for Rick? Seeing none, Ms. Sturmlinger, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2519.
Councilmember Stevens? Councilmember McCune? Yes. Councilmember Bope?
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell?
Yes.
Councilmember Remy?
Yes.
Councilmember Edens?
Yes.
Councilmember Brost?
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano?
Yes.
Councilmember Werther?
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer?
Yes.
Councilmember Dillard?
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni?
Yes.
Councilmember Gragnani?
Yes.
Okay, the bill passes. Moving to Bill 2524, it's before the council for final passage, and it concerns Ward 6. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Jordan, second by Councilmember Bope. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Sturmlinger, please read Bill 2524.
Bill 2524, an ordinance of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute real estate purchase and sales agreement with Glencoe Community Church of God, Inc. for the acquisition of certain property under the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program as administered by Missouri State Emergency Management Agency within the City of Wildwood.
Thank you. Rick, do you have anything you'd like to mention relative to Bill 2524?
No, Mayor, but again, I'm available for any questions or comments regarding this matter.
Any questions for Rick or any comments? All right, seeing none, Ms. Sturmlinger, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2524.
Councilmember McCune? Yes. Councilmember Boat?
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell?
Yes.
Councilmember Remy?
Yes.
Councilmember Edens?
Yes.
Councilmember Brost?
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano?
Yes.
Councilmember Werther?
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer?
Yes.
Councilmember Dillard?
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni?
Yes.
Councilmember Gragnani?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Okay, moving to Bill 2525, it's also before the council for final passage, and it concerns all wards. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Gragnani, seconded by Councilmember McCutcheon. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Sturmlinger, please read Bill 2525.
Bill 2525, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Wildwood, Missouri that authorizes the addition of a new section 415.610 of Chapter 415 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Wildwood, zoning ordinance to accommodate small cell technology deployments in the city's public right-of-ways, areas, and other locations within the City of Wildwood, such being consistent with recent state statute in the same regard, and also reflecting the letter of recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission that is dated October 21, 2019 on this matter.
Thank you. Joe, anything you'd like to mention relative to Bill 2525?
No, sir, but the city attorney and the Department of Planning are available for any comments or questions.
All right. Are there any comments or questions relative to this bill from any member of the council? Seeing none, Ms. Sturmlinger, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2525.
Councilmember Boat? Councilmember Bertolino?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell?
Yes.
Councilmember Remy?
Yes.
Councilmember Edens?
Yes.
Councilmember Brost?
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano?
Yes.
Councilmember Werther?
Abstain.
Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer?
Yes.
Councilmember Dillard?
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni?
Yes.
Councilmember Gragnani?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember McCune?
Okay, the bill passes. Moving next to Bill 2526, it's before the council for second reading and final passage, and it concerns Ward 8. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Garitano, seconded by Councilmember Stevens. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Sturmlinger, please read Bill 2526.
Bill 2526, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor of the City of Wildwood, Missouri to execute a contract on behalf of it with Human Nature, Inc. for its development of an environmental analysis regarding the subject 6-acre property, a public input process to obtain resident input, and a concept plan identifying a design concept for the site's future use consistent with the attached contract and exhibits, which was the recommendation of the Planning and Parks Committee of the City Council from its October 15, 2019 meeting.
Thank you. Joe, anything you'd like to say relative to this bill?
No, sir, but again, the Department of Planning and Parks is available for any comments or questions.
Any comments, questions? Councilmember Stevens?
This may be like way too early in the process, but I did have a resident approach about having some sort of recognition for armed services in conjunction with this project. Would that be something that would come later on through the public input, or would it need to go to Human Nature early in the process?
Actually, Councilmember Stevens, there's been several suggestions for potential improvements or facilities in the 6-acre park property. And what we've been doing is just, we've got a list established, and we thought we'd go ahead and send it to Human Nature as soon as they're under contract so they can have it as a reference. And then certainly when the public input segment of the process starts, they can include it as an item, a question, a comment, and that way we can get feedback before we make a decision.
Okay, great. Yeah, if you could add that to the list if it's not already on there, that would be great. Thank you.
It's not, and we will. Thank you.
Okay, Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, Ms. Sturmlinger, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2526.
Councilmember Bertolino?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell?
Yes.
Councilmember Remy?
Yes.
Councilmember Edens?
Yes.
Councilmember Brost?
Yes.
Councilmember Garetano?
Yes.
Councilmember Werther?
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer?
Yes.
Councilmember Dillard?
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni?
Yes.
Councilmember Gragnani?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember McCune?
Yes.
Councilmember Boat?
Yes.
Okay, the bill passes. And finally, of our second readings, moving to Bill 2527, it concerns Ward 6. Is there a motion for the second reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Jordan, seconded by Councilmember Boat. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Sturmlinger, please read Bill 2527.
Bill 2527, an ordinance of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute real estate purchase and sales agreement with Bernard A. Elmer for the acquisition of certain property under the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program as administered by the Missouri State Emergency Management Agency within the City of Wildwood.
Thank you. Rick, anything you'd like to mention relative to Bill 2527?
No, Mayor, but again, I'm available for any questions or comments on this item.
Any questions or comments for Rick? All right, seeing none, Ms. Sturmlinger, please call the roll for final passage of Bill 2527.
Councilmember Dodwell?
Yes.
Councilmember Remy?
Yes.
Councilmember Edens?
Yes.
Councilmember Brost?
Yes.
Councilmember Garetano?
Yes.
Councilmember Werther?
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer?
Yes.
Councilmember Dillard?
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni?
Yes.
Councilmember Gragnani?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens? Councilmember McCune?
Yes.
Councilmember Boat?
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino?
Okay, the bill passes. Now moving into first readings, council members, the first three bills, 2528, 2529, and 2530, all relate to the same issue, and that is the granting approval of a replacement, replacement deposit agreement concerning Main Street crossing. If there's no objection to expedite the business of the council, I would suggest we handle these three bills in mass, and the Director of Planning is agreeable to that. Is there any objection to the council to handling these three bills in mass? All right.
Question.
Please state your question.
Yeah, for the city attorney, are we able to go ahead and still accomplish two readings by combining these into one?
So
As you know, we're required to go ahead and have two readings on all bills.
So he's asking
for passage. So if we combine these, we're effectively, in some ways, at least some people would see it as not having a first reading on some of these bills, and then moving to a second reading. So that's my question. Are we still accomplishing that, or are we not?
As long as the bill titles are actually read, you are reading them a first time. I don't think the motion taking them en masse is going to change that.
So then 25, 28, 29, and 30 will all be read?
They'll be read tonight for the first time, and absent,
Okay.
well, if I can finish answering your question, and absent a two-thirds vote of the council, they'll be read a second time, which may happen individually or in mass. But the placing them in mass, they are three separate bills, if I understand your question correctly, and handling them in mass does not constitute a second reading. It's only a first reading of each of the three bills.
That's not what I asked, so that's okay.
Well, what was your question again then?
The city attorney's answered it.
Oh, okay. Great. Okay, so without objection, is there a motion for the first reading of Bill 2528, 2529, and 2530? Made by Councilmember Stevens, second by Councilmember Dodwell. All in favor of the motion for first reading, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Sorry?
And just doing a second reading.
Let's go through a first reading first, and then we'll, okay. Ms. Sturmlinger, would you please read Bills 2528, 2529, and 2530?
Bill 2528, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, granting approval of the replacement deposit agreement for Plat 1 of the Main Street Crossing Subdivision, Plat Book 365, page 323 to 327, a 35-lot portion of an overall 28-acre residential development that is located in the west half of the southwest quarter of Section 1 and the southeast half of the southeast quarter of Section 2, Township 44 North, Range 3 East, City of Wildwood, St. Louis County, Missouri, and more specifically situated on the east side of State Route 109 on the north and south sides of Main Street, and for the purposes of allowing the developer additional time to complete required improvements associated with the project. Bill 2529, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, granting approval of the replacement deposit agreement for Plat 2 of the Main Street Crossing Subdivision Plat Book 366, page 41 to 43, a 35-lot portion of an overall 28-acre residential development that is located in the west half of the southwest quarter of Section 1 and the east half of the southeast quarter of Section 2, Township 44 North, Range 3 East, City of Wildwood, St. Louis County, Missouri, and more specifically situated on the east side of State Route 109 on the north and south sides of Main Street for the purposes of allowing the developer additional time to complete required improvements associated with the project. Bill 2530, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, granting approval of a replacement deposit agreement on Plat 3 of the Main Street Crossing Subdivision, Plat Book 366, page 290 to 293, a 34-lot portion of overall 28-acre residential development that is located in the west half of the southwest quarter of Section 1 and the east half of southeast quarter of Section 2, Township 44 North, Range 3 East, City of Wildwood, St. Louis County, Missouri, and more specifically situated on the east side of State Route 109 on the north and south sides of Main Street for the purposes of allowing the developer additional time to complete required improvements associated with the project.
Thank you. Joe, do you have anything you'd like to mention relative to any of the three bills?
Just as a summary, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, Main Street Crossing is a major residential project located in the town center area. There were 3 plats that ultimately approved 100+ lots. Progress has been made on the development of the subdivision, but the 2-year time frame with the allowable 6-month extension is coming due. Also, the developer, Payne Family Homes, is switching financial institutions, so the timing for that was perfect as well. And there is no need for a second reading tonight since the default date is before the next meeting of the City Council.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Dodwell.
That was going to be my question, Joe. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from any member of the council? All right. The 3 bills will be on the council's agenda for its next meeting. Thank you. Moving to Bill 2531, it's before the council for first reading, and it concerns all wards. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Dodwell, second by Councilmember Bartoni. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Opposed.
We have 1 opposed. Councilmember Werther. Any other opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstention.
We have 1 abstention. Councilmember McCutcheon. Any other abstentions? Ms. Termelier, please read Bill 2531.
Bill 2531, an ordinance adopting the municipal budget and capital improvement program of the City of Wildwood for fiscal year 2020.
Thank you. Mr. Ansom, anything you'd like to mention relative to Bill 2531?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening again to you and to members of council. The item before you this evening for first reading just approves the budget for the 2020 fiscal year and operating and capital budgets. The public hearing for this bill will actually be held at our first meeting in December, on December 9th, but would be available to answer any questions at this time. But I would like to thank all the employees who helped put this budget together, in particular our finance officer, Dawn Kaiser, who has to work with all of us to put these numbers together and make changes, several of them quickly and on the fly. She is unable to be here this evening, but she will be available at our next council meeting to answer questions that we may receive relative to the public hearing or final passage of the budget.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? All right, if not, it'll be on the council's next agenda. Thank you, Sam. Moving next to Bill 2532. It is before the council for first reading, and it concerns all wards as well. Is there a motion for the first reading of the bill? Made by Councilmember Werther, seconded by Councilmember Edens. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Ms. Sturmlinger, please read Bill 2532.
Bill 2532, an ordinance of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor to negotiate and execute an addendum to a renewal of the police services agreement with St. Louis County for the year 2020.
Thank you. Sam, anything you'd like to mention relative to Bill 2532?
Just a couple of items. Again, this topic was discussed at our previous work session, held at our prior meeting. Captain Mundell and I are available to answer any questions, but as a point to note, the Board of Public Safety did take this budget item under consideration at their last public safety meeting, and they did approve recommending passage of this bill.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember McCune?
So it wasn't an addendum to the original agreement?
How the contract, and Captain Mundell can correct me if I'm wrong, but the original agreement that was signed between the city and St. Louis County was for a one-year period, so this amends that agreement just to include the 2020 fiscal year.
And what I read, it was just the terms that changed with the addendum was just the period. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
That's all I want to know. Thanks.
Any other questions? Councilmember Grignani?
Yes, would you like a second reading on this?
I don't think it's necessary. We'll take that up at the next meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Dodwell?
I would just like to say thank you very much to the St. Louis County Police Force, the work that they do. They keep us protected, they keep us on guard, and every man and woman on the squad here that I have ever spoken to has been friendly, cordial, professional, and the epitome of what I would like to see in a police force. So thank you all.
Thank you. All right, moving into, so the Bill 2532 will be on the council's next agenda. Moving into resolutions, Resolution 2019-37 is before the council. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-37 made by Councilmember Remy, seconded by Councilmember Farmer? Ms. Sturmlinger, please read the resolution.
Resolution 2019-37, a resolution requesting the City of Ellisville, Missouri consider relocating a medical marijuana dispensary approved in proximity to an elementary school attended by City of Wildwood children.
Thank you. Councilmember Remy, would you like to say anything relative to the resolution?
No, I would reserve comments if there's further discussion, but I think the resolution stands alone.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Bertolino?
Yeah, maybe you can answer this one. The resolution uses the phrase, and we're talking about 1,000 feet distance, and we use the phrase at a distance potentially less than 1,000. Do we have a really solid number here, or are we going to Ellisville and say we think you're violating the 1,000 feet, but we don't really have any facts? I mean, do we really have facts say yes, we think you're violating the state statute because you're within 1,000 feet?
I think the resolution explains that our recommendation is that we would prefer this not to be less than 1,000 feet. So that's what we're saying. Yeah. We're not actually getting involved with state law.
Right, and my understanding is, and the city attorney, correct me if I'm wrong, just to make sure there's no misunderstanding, that their location, proposed location that's been approved, actually, their approved location under the CUP complies with the state law as it currently exists. Is that correct, City Attorney Young?
In terms of the distance requirement, the distance requirement is a 1,000-foot maximum, not a minimum.
Yeah.
So to the extent their ordinance allows it to be within 1,000 feet, that would comply with their ordinance.
And just for clarification, Dave, it's 840 feet if you want, by property to property.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'm sorry, Councilmember Stevens.
Motion to postpone indefinitely. I attended the Ellisville meeting, spoke with their mayor, and they're not going to rezone this. It's just, I don't know why we would cause conflict with Ellisville in this regard. So I would just move on from this. It doesn't make any sense to pass this. So,
okay, so we have a motion to postpone indefinitely, which would effectively kill the resolution. Is there a second to the motion to postpone indefinitely? Second by Councilmember Werther. So the discussion is on the motion to postpone indefinitely. Any discussion on the motion to postpone indefinitely? Councilor Bertolino.
Yeah, Niles, I appreciate your effort on this, but I really think that the city needs to take a position. We have our residents, our citizens, our kids going to that school close by. I think we need to have a statement. And so and Ellisville certainly has a right to manage their own city, but they are impinging on, I think, the rights and concerns of citizens who live in Wildwood. So I think we should go ahead with it.
Councilor Garitano.
Yeah, I think the resolution here it's not about the legality of it and all, and there's a part of me that knows that there's probably a chance that Ellisville would not consider our request, but it's more a sentiment and an expression of how we feel. And I think, at least I know from my perspective, this is about the kids that go there to that school. And while this is in Councilmember Remy's ward, we also have a school in Ellisville in Ward 8 that serves Ward 8 students, which is off of Ridge Road. And so I could see this someday coming across my desk as an issue where I have parents contacting me from neighborhoods like Crown Point Estates that have similar concerns. And again, my hands are tied because Ellisville has every right to do what they want to do here, but there's nothing that stops us from saying we have a concern about this and we'd at least like to express it. That's up to Ellisville to decide what to do. And again, whether it's Ellisville or any other city, it doesn't matter whether it's Ellisville, it's any other city, that's how I would feel. But I think it's good to at least express that message that we would like that honored.
Councilor Stevens.
And Ellisville has been working with Rockwood, the Drug-Free Coalition, and they did pass a motion at their last meeting to add some disclaimers and some literature. Also looking into tamper-proof containers for any sales and stuff that are there. So it's not like they're oblivious to the concerns of the local school district that is around there. They've spoken to them. They've passed this. It's already done. It just doesn't make any sense to move forward to tell them that they shouldn't have done it, which is essentially what Wildwood would be doing. So I don't see any need for it.
Councilor McCune.
I've talked to several council members regarding this issue, and I support it just for the reason because it does relate to the kids that belong in Wildwood. And I think that there was rumor that it was a personal agenda item, which I had approached that question and was confirmed that it was not. The other thing that I'm more worried about is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Councilmember Remy, I think you tried to work with them before we went forward with a resolution, and that was with the mayor and the council to say, hey, I think you guys got this wrong. This is a concern of ours. What can we do? How can we work together with this? And it was brushed off like it wasn't a big deal. So I think that given them some chance to work with us and they didn't, I think now we have to put our feet down in the sand and just say, hey, we're not going to condone what they ended up passing, even though they may be in their right, but just not to entertain us from the beginning is an unfortunate situation.
Councilmember Bartoni.
So I agree that we need to move forward with this resolution, and the business that has been approved at the CUP, they don't have a license yet. So they're not open for business anytime soon. But is this resolution something that we can pass on to the state of Missouri, the agency that is issuing the licenses? Because that might be an avenue also just to make sure they are aware that there are neighbors that are not really in favor of this, and there are, God only knows how many applicants there are for these licenses, and everybody is not going to get one, and this might be a reason for somebody not to get one.
City Attorney Young, would you please respond to Councilmember Bartoni's question?
I'm not aware of a formal process to oppose an application that's administratively handled at the state level. I will review that and let you know.
Councilor Remy, did you want to respond to Councilmember McCune's comments?
Just in general to the comments.
Okay, sure.
No, I appreciate everybody's thoughtful comments on this issue. I agree with you, Councilmember Garitano. This isn't about the legality. This is about supporting children in Wards 2, Wards 3, and Wards 4, which is 3 wards that have Wildwood children, which makes up about a little under 50% that actually goes to that school. I appreciate Councilmember Stevens bringing up Rockwood Drug-Free Coalition. I've got an email in front of me right now, and apparently maybe it's a little bit different than you understand. So they actually discuss specifically in the email that they don't agree with this, and normalizing marijuana does not achieve their goal of trying to dissuade children from marijuana, which is not my main objection here. But they do say that they do support that such facilities should not be located within 1,000 feet of a school. This is 840 feet. It's not necessary. We're not trying to create problems with our neighbors. But I've talked to a lot of people. In fact, I don't have children at this school. This was brought to my attention. And in concert with this attention, I've given it its due diligence because it's a serious matter. So I think the safety of our children is priority, and I think making a statement from the dais is important because it directly affects our children, and I'm not willing to gamble on that. If we've got the ability to mitigate potential risks, that's exactly our job here. Now, I will say one more thing. I suspect from talking to a lot of parents, and I think a number of council members have also talked to principals and other members of the school, they didn't know about this. In fact, many of them weren't even made aware until they read the article in West News Magazine after the fact. And I think that that may have played a role in the process of why this got passed. So I would not support indefinitely, and frankly, I think it's irresponsible of us to do that in behalf of our children. And so I think a vote against it would certainly tell me where your stance is with children and safety.
So, Councilmember Farmer, if you just indulge me 1 second, I don't remember exactly, Councilmember Kuhn, your words, but relative to, I think you said something to the effect of that Ellisville, didn't do anything and sort of brushed it off or whatever. That, I just want to say that's not exactly the case. That there have been discussions that have been ongoing relative to this. So I just want to, out of fairness, be clear on that. Councilmember Farmer.
Yeah, I wanted to agree with Ken. Some of my residents' kids go to this school, and I took the time to call the school and the PTO and some other people, and for whatever reason, none of them were aware that this was going to go on. So there's not a whole lot, in my understanding, that we can do to affect what Ellisville does, but we can ask them to at least notify the people that are affected by it, whether they live in Ellisville or not. So my opinion is I think that this is something we need to support. It's not our position to change what the state law is, but we do need to make a statement for the kids and for the fact that, we make a lot of decisions sitting up here that we have to notify people for. I think that perhaps the process wasn't maybe handled in the best way. I know that there's an ongoing process where I think a lot of this is going to get sorted out, but I do think it is important for us as a city to make a statement on where we stand on this thing.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is a motion to postpone indefinitely. Councilmember Stevens, do you have a question, point of information, or a question?
Well, did I still have another opportunity?
You don't. You've exercised your two.
On the amendment, or?
Correct, on your motion, you have.
All
right, so the motion on the floor is a motion to postpone indefinitely. Roll call vote, please. An affirmative vote is a motion to supports the motion to postpone indefinitely.
Councilmember Remy?
No.
Councilmember Edens?
No.
Councilmember Brost?
No.
Councilmember Garitano?
No.
Councilmember Werther?
Aye.
Councilmember Jordan?
No.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
No.
Councilmember Farmer? No. Councilmember Dillard?
No.
Councilmember Bartoni?
No.
Councilmember Gragnani?
No.
Councilmember Stevens?
Yes.
Councilmember McCune?
No.
Councilmember Bope?
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino?
No.
Councilmember Dodwell?
No.
Okay, so the motion to postpone fails, so we are now back to the resolution. Seeing no further discussion on the resolution, roll call vote for final passage, roll call vote for passage of Resolution 2019-37, please.
Councilmember Edens?
Yes.
Councilmember Brost?
Yes.
Councilmember Garitano?
Yes.
Councilmember Werther? Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
Councilmember McCutcheon?
Yes.
Councilmember Farmer? Yes. Councilmember Dillard?
Yes.
Councilmember Bartoni?
Yes.
Councilmember Gragnani?
Yes.
Councilmember Stevens?
Just a point of clarification, the ordinance does say that the law requires them to be no more than 1,000 feet, but the city attorney did say that that's not actually the law, right? So is this just worded incorrectly? Because otherwise...
So we'll treat that as a point of order. Would you please answer his question, city attorney?
Whose ordinance are you referring to?
Well, the resolution says, a Missouri law requiring dispensaries to be located no more than 1,000 feet from school. That's not actually what the amendment to that voters approved by like 65% says, though, right?
Well, state law says 1,000 feet unless reduced by a city.
Okay, but it's not a good,
Okay, and we've had discussion on the motion, so continue with the roll call, please, Ms. Strimlinger.
I'm a no on that, if it's my turn.
Can you repeat that?
No was my vote.
Councilmember McCune?
Yes.
Councilmember Boat?
Yes.
Councilmember Bertolino?
Yes.
Councilmember Dodwell?
Yes.
Councilmember Remy?
Yes.
Okay, so the resolution passes. Moving next to Resolution 2019-38. It's before the council and it concerns all wards. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-38? Made by Councilmember Farmer, second by Councilmember Dodwell. Ms. Strimlinger, please read the resolution.
Resolution 2019-38, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor of the City of Wildwood, Missouri to execute contracts with instructors from the Wildwood Family YMCA to provide water, fitness, and other health-related classes throughout the fiscal year 2020 to Wildwood seniors 60+, all funded by the way of community development block grant monies that are received from St. Louis County, Missouri.
Thank you. Joe, do you have anything you'd like to mention relative to this resolution?
Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, the Department of Planning, through the authorization of City Council, has been using community development block grant funds to fund senior programming for Wildwood seniors in the city of Wildwood. The programs have been very successful, and it's an appropriate utilization of the community development block grant funds, and we hope to continue in 2020.
Thank you. Any questions for Joe or other comments from any member of the council? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to adopt Resolution 2019-38, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Resolution passes. Moving next to Resolution 2019-39. It's for the council, and it concerns all wards. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2019-39 made by Councilmember McCune, second by Councilmember McCutcheon? Ms. Strimlinger, please read the resolution.
Resolution 2019-39, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Wildwood, Missouri, authorizing the mayor of the City of Wildwood, Missouri to execute a contract with Wildwood Yoga and Wellness to provide classes throughout fiscal year 2020 to Wildwood seniors 60+, such being funded by the way of community development block grant monies that are received from St. Louis County, Missouri.
Thank you. Joe, do you have anything you'd like to mention relative to Bill 2019-39?
Resolution 2019-39 is very similar to the previous resolution just passed, so the department is available for any comments or questions.
All right. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of the resolution, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. The motion carries. Moving into miscellaneous, the first of the two items, approval of, actually we have three items. Approval of expenditures. Are there any questions on the expenditures? We can take those now. Otherwise, would entertain a motion to approve the expenditures as presented. Maybe Councilmember Edens, seconded by, are you seconding the motion, Councilmember Stevens?
No, I said a question.
Okay, well, we need to wait until we get a second before you ask your question. Is there a second? Maybe by Councilmember Bartoni. Councilmember Stevens.
On the litigation contingencies, I noticed that like for the last 10 months, there's been one on there every month adding up for the legal salvator contingency. Got the number somewhere, but and then the last two expenditures, there wasn't anything on there, but I know the case is still ongoing. So from like September 19 through, or from February through September, there was like, I don't know, somewhere around $18,000 worth of, expenditures listed for that. Why aren't they on there in the last two expenditure reports? I'm just curious.
City Attorney Young.
In terms of any legal work pertaining to an active piece of litigation, I'd be happy to talk about that in a closed session or offline with you.
Okay, I'll save it for offline.
Okay, so Councilor McCune.
So it's for the city administrator. So the Stacy Menkoff for the design of the 2020 calendar for $1,200, is that just the design or the concept of it, or what did that entail?
I'll defer to Director Vunich to answer that question. He's more familiar with the project.
Joe.
Ms. McCune, it's actually the compilation of all the photographs plus putting it in the format that then is sent to the printer.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, all in favor of the motion to approve expenditures, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Opposed, Councilmember Stevens, Councilmember Werther, Councilmember Dillard, and Councilmember Gregnani. Any other opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Moving next into receipt and file, we have two. Joe, the first is the Planning and Zoning Commission's approval of the 5-year capital improvement plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, state statute requires the Planning and Zoning Commission to review the capital improvement plan, the capital improvement 5-year plan for the city of Wildwood. The statute specifically states that a commission that adopts a master plan, in this case, must review and act upon the 5-year capital improvements plan. The Planning and Zoning Commission received the document from the Department of Administration for its meeting last Monday night. The discussion was thorough, and at the end of the discussion, the Planning and Zoning Commission endorsed the capital improvement, the 5-year capital improvement plan for 2020.
Okay, any questions for Joe? Councilmember Stevens.
I just had a question on the town center development construction, $800,000. Do you feel that that's enough? Because we're spending about that much on a Ward 5 park. Is there just not as much infrastructure needed for that type of facility, or?
There's 2 points I think I'd like to mention. First, we generally use a number about 10 to 12% on the soft cost to reflect the overall cost of the project. So we've set aside $90,000 for the soft cost at this stage. It's not to say that the design and engineering will not, which is the second component of the soft cost, may be more. I don't know yet. And I think more importantly and secondly is the fact that it's been kind of envisioned as a village green, and they aren't active facilities per se, they're more passive, and that means less improvements.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions for Joe? All right, moving next, Joe, the water testing regarding PZ 1517 Babbler Farms LLC.
Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, this is for a more for information item. The testing results done by the city's consultant of the Roberts Lake have been completed. That information was provided to the Planning and Zoning Commission for comment. Public comment was also allowed at that time. That comment is being assessed by the Department of Planning, and a final report is due on December 2nd to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you. Any questions for Joe? Councilmember Dillard.
During public participation, Joe, Mr. Hudson brought up several points. I'm not a scientist. Apparently, other people are looking at this, but one thing that concerned me is that he said he brought several documents to P&Z that were not included in this receiving file. Why not? And who makes that determination?
The department, in this case the director. The Planning and Zoning Commission received a report from the Department of Planning that was posted formally on the website for public dissemination and use. The items that Mr. Hudson noted were submitted that night, handed out, and placed at the seats of the commission members. It was not part of the formal report that the department had prepared. The Planning and Zoning Commission acted on the formal report. The information was provided tonight as a courtesy, and it was the decision of the department to do such.
Is there a way for us to make a motion to include his information as part of the receiving file?
It will be part of the final report now that it's been received by the Department of Planning. If the Hudsons or anyone else in the public would want information provided as part of the report, we often say, please provide it before the meeting date. If they don't have the information, we still distribute it that night, but it's not part of the official report that was posted online and submitted for public use and review. So as I say, I have to be cautious about adding things into a commission action that weren't part of what we posted for public dissemination.
Okay.
I do now have it, and it will be part of that final report.
So as long as it's part of the final report, as long as the city has record of receiving it and it's part of the public record.
Yes, we received it on the 2nd, unfortunately, after the posting, but we now have it.
Okay, thank you.
I think I saw another hand somewhere. All right, if not, I want to wish everyone with us a happy Thanksgiving to our residents and to the council and our city team members. Councilmember Edens.
I just have 3 things, and it's all positive, so everybody just enjoy this joke and concern from a young constituent that Don and I had, and I think it's the best question I have ever been asked by a constituent and may ever be asked. Don and I were explaining what the city is considering in terms of deer management, that residents will be receiving a newsletter. We reminded the residents to please not feed the deer and discuss chronic wasting disease. And this young man was very distraught, and he said, I know you said not to feed the deer, but what about the reindeer? Can't I feed the reindeer? And so it's just a powerful reminder that as we talk about deer in the month of December, that we want to include reindeer. Don and I went ahead and went out on a limb and said the official position of Ward 2 is to please feed the reindeer. Because had this young man not been brave enough to say that in front of a bunch of adults, he could have gone home very upset. So that's the first thing. The second is just a reminder, coming up on December 7th, we're having our Winterfest, going through the scheduling of events. Santa will be there for pictures from 3:30 to 5:30. Food and drink vendors from 3:30 to 7. Carolers from 5 to 7. The tree lighting will occur at 7, and there is a gingerbread house contest citywide, all ages. You bring the gingerbread house with you, and I believe the award will come out at 6. And finally, it's my understanding that typically in December we have one meeting, and then there's usually a motion to postpone the second meeting. I believe that's correct.
That's correct.
So I'm working under the assumption that will happen and that there will only be one December meeting. I think in general it's important to carry the joy of childhood with us without actually acting like a child ourselves. And it's easy sometimes when you get a little bit of power, you feel like you're on maybe a pedestal, and in general, I'm no better than anybody else on this council. I'm no better than anyone else in the community. So bearing in mind that we can do our job seriously but not take ourselves seriously, I am going to challenge the council right now to wear your best and your tackiest ugly holiday sweater to our one and only December meeting. And or you can do an outfit, but I just think it's important to kind of come together, and you can still express your individuality. And I know I will certainly try to be tacky and festive, but it's okay to take your job seriously and not yourself too seriously. And if you come to the meetings regularly, I would encourage you to wear something festive and secular. So hope to not be the only one dressed like that. Don't leave me hanging. That's all I got.
Thank you. Councilmember Stevens.
So, Mr. Anselm, I know I had to ask you about this, but I was looking for some older information, and then a resident was also looking for some older information. I know that you said that for the previous council meetings that it was bloated on the website, and so you were transferring to the archive center. Is there any way to get those back up at all immediately and then still work on the transfer process to the archive center?
Yes, it's possible. Just to explain a little bit about the situation, having all of our agendas on our website really clogs up the system on the back end, making it difficult for staff to put agendas together and have them published on the website in an efficient manner. So we have taken, at least I've taken the city council meetings. We have 2018, all of 2018 meetings are published in our archive center. 2017 will be done tomorrow, and then I think 2016 is where we maybe had a bit of a transition between the new system and the prior system, but we are working on those as well. I would just add and ask, for the public patience, if they have any requests for any information, our city clerk's office is more than prepared to address those requests, but if we could get a little bit of patience to get our system cleaned up, I think I would appreciate it.
And if they did have requests, they wouldn't need to go through like the formal sunshine law type request or anything like that.
If they want to send an email
or anything.
I would recommend they follow that process, but, certainly if they're looking for a specific meeting or a specific item, we can pull that pretty quickly.
And then when do you anticipate all of the?
As soon as we can get the information up. We'd contacted the website provider, and they wanted to charge about $8,000 to do that work for us, and I figured we could save that expense and do that ourselves. So it just takes a little bit more time in addition to the other duties that we have going on. But a quick request from a citizen or a council member for information, that's readily available. We can get that to you quickly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Garetano.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Councilmember Edens for advocating for our city events, including the upcoming Winter Fest. I'm really interested in the gingerbread contest, and I want to ask Councilmember Gragnani if we can work on a gingerbread house. I have an idea using cannoli shells, so, we'll have to talk about that.
Yeah, I think we could glue 24 of them together.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor McCutcheon.
Yeah, I'd just like to remind everybody that the naming of the Ward 5 Park is up on the city website.
Thank you. Anything further? All right, seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Made by Councilmember Remy. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Farmer. Non-debatable. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So we're adjourned. Thank you.